Today we're taking a look at the very retro 2013 Dodge Challenger SRT8. Now this particular one is the 392 model, which means that we have a 6.4-liter engine under the hood. According to this little badge here, Dodge is also calling it a 392 cubic inch Hemi. The engine's good for 470 horsepower, so let's dive under the hood, let's dive inside and take it for a spin. The retro theme continues around the back, and even though I'm not really a fan of cars from the time period that this car is trying to imitate, I have to admit this car is really sexy looking. Up front we have a very retro front end with round headlights, round turn signals, but of course a plastic grille because this is 2013, not 1973. The SRT8 treatment gets you 245/45 R20s up front, and to help you apply that power, 255/45 R20s out back. There are only two retro things you'll find under this hood. The first is the engine badging, because of course Chrysler decided to go retro and display the displacement of this engine in cubic inches rather than liters on the badging of this engine. The second thing are push rods, because this engine is still a pushrod V8 engine, although it is a thoroughly modern design from Chrysler. It's essentially based off the regular Hemi engine that's found in the Chrysler 300C, as well as the Challenger and the Jeep Grand Cherokee, but this one's been bumped up to 6.4 liters, still has 2 spark plugs per cylinder, and is mated to either your choice of a Tremec 6-speed TR6060 transmission or a 5-speed Mercedes automatic. This isn't just a bored-out version of the old 6.1-liter engine you used to find under this hood. Chrysler did do a number of tweaks, like including the multi-displacement system if you get your Challenger with the automatic transmission. Since ours is the manual, we don't get that one, but our fuel economy still beats that 5-speed automatic thanks to an extremely tall 6th gear. Versus that old 6.1-liter engine, power is up from 425 horsepower to 470 horsepower, and we get a whopping 90 more pound-feet of torque from this engine. Of course, Chrysler does want you to run this on premium, but it will operate safely on regular unleaded. Just expect a power reduction. As you'd expect from a muscle car, all that power is sent to the rear wheels only. There's no all-wheel drive option, and we are charged a $1,000 gas guzzler tax with this vehicle. If it wasn't obvious from the outside, let's start off our interior tour by saying that the Challenger is a very large vehicle. It is, of course, essentially the two-door version of the Dodge Charger and the Chrysler 300, which are very large vehicles themselves. Now, all of those are essentially a Chrysler reimagining, perhaps, of the Chrysler LHS, so large vehicle, and they borrowed Mercedes-Benz S-Class and E-Class parts to jam under the hood, so the suspension components are fairly closely related to the S-Class and the E-Class in terms of design. That should really tell you how big this vehicle is. That all makes the Challenger much bigger and much heavier than the Mustang or the Camaro. Our particular Challenger SRT8 weighs about 4,200 pounds, which honestly is fairly light for a modern vehicle like this, but that is considerably heavier than the Mustang GT, which is around 3,600 pounds or so. Compared to the Mustang and Camaro, the Challenger's interior is fairly competitive in terms of parts quality as well as fit and finish. We still get a slightly rubbery dashboard here. This isn't exactly the best interior that Chrysler has ever done, but then again, the Mustang and Camaro interiors are really not that special either. We get a fake aluminum trim here in the center console, and because Chrysler has not redone the interior of the Challenger for 2013, like the Charger and Chrysler 300, we still get their old 6-inch Uconnect radio instead of their large 8-inch touchscreen unit. Over here on the driver's side, we have one of the best steering wheels I've ever held in my entire life. And I'm being perfectly honest about that one. This steering wheel has nice, thick, chunky grips. We have perforated leather in the middle, nice soft leather on top. The only down points on this steering wheel really are the plastic trim. This plastic metal trim on the bottom of the steering wheel has some rough edges on the bottom, and that's not terribly nice. But the rest of the steering wheel honestly is so good that I can forget those plastic bits. And of course, the Challenger also has a heated steering wheel standard, which is controlled by this little button here in the center console that really makes driving the Challenger a joy. The back seats in the Challenger are pretty comfortable for a two-door car. Now remember, this is about the same size as a BMW 6 Series. This is a pretty big car. I'm 6 feet tall, this front seat's adjusted for me, and my knees aren't really touching this front seat. The bottom cushion and the back cushions in this car aren't strangely shaped either. Now, a common trick for two-door coupes that try and seat four is that they will change the shapes of these rear seats, and they won't be normal seat shaped. They'll have these really strangely shaped thigh boosters that sort of cause you to be curled up, and they'll have back cushions that are really curved over, so that way you're sort of leaning forward as well. That doesn't happen in the Challenger. I can sit upright, but my hair is brushing the ceiling in the middle, and it's something that I could do for maybe half an hour to an hour or so on a car trip without too much of a problem. If you're a smaller person and these tiny side windows don't bother you, you could probably do this for an extended period of time. These really are fairly good seats. We also get an armrest and cup holder in the rear, which is another nice touch that you don't find in vehicles like this very often. The other thing that we get is a middle seat in this car, and I'm going to sit in here so you can see. Now, my head is touching the ceiling when I'm sitting in the middle seat, but I can still fit back here. And most importantly, this car is wide enough that you could fit two adults on either side of me. As always, you should spend some time in a car before you decide to buy to make sure that that driver's seat is comfortable for you. In the Challenger, we do get a tilt telescoping steering wheel with a very good range of motion. We also get a power driver's seat with a four-way adjustable lumbar support, although all Challenger models have a manual recline mechanism in the driver's seat. These seats are severely bolstered, but these seats are fairly wide and sized for normal American adults, so you shouldn't really have a problem in these seats unless you're fairly skinny and you feel like you're not really being gripped in that driver's seat enough. It's now time for our exclusive trunk comfort index. With the Challenger, there's immediately a problem because this retro design, as you can see, gives you more of a trunk hood than an actual trunk hatch like you'd find in a modern vehicle. Means the step-in height for the trunk is quite high. It's a good thing that I'm 6 feet tall so I can get in the trunk. Of course, this trunk is 16 cubic feet, again paying homage to classic vehicles with an enormous trunk, although there is no trunk handle on the inside of the trunk or this leading edge of the trunk lid here, so it's really difficult to close this trunk lid if you're outside the vehicle because there's really nowhere to grab onto other than that dirty outside of the trunk. The Challenger scores a solid 8 out of 10 points in our exclusive trunk comfort index because this trunk is huge. Again, this is a 16-point-something cubic foot trunk, which makes it decently bigger than a Camaro or a Mustang. I have the largest roller bag you can carry on a domestic flight in here with me, and you could still fit 2 journalists in this trunk. In addition, Chrysler has used trunk hinges that don't impact the cargo area, which means if you can fit it in this trunk, the lid should close, and when you close the lid on yourself, it won't hit your knees. All Challenger SRT8 models come standard with Chrysler's 6.5-inch Uconnect system. Now, this is their older last generation system, so this is not the same as the Uconnect 8.3-inch that's found in the Chrysler 300 as well as the new Challenger. The system does have navigation, as you can see, with XM satellite traffic as well. We also get a Bluetooth phone interface, as you'd expect. We also have voice command for our navigation entries as well as our phone entries. There are no voice commands in this version of Uconnect for searching for particular songs or artists or playlists or genres like there are in Ford's Sync product, but you can voice command things like go to the next track and change source, etc. We also have a hard disk for storing music files on this particular system. You can rip them off your CD or transfer them from the USB port. This particular Uconnect system also offers 2 USB ports. We have one right here in the dash and another in the center console, as well as the usual auxiliary input here. BMW and Challenger fans alike are probably going to dislike my comparison of the 6 Series to the Challenger for a wide variety of reasons, but it makes perfect sense in my mind, primarily because the Challenger is so much larger and heavier than a Camaro or a Mustang. This car seats 5. Of course, you have a middle seat back there. The rear seats are actually usable for real human beings in the Challenger, and the Challenger is considerably heavier than a Mustang. The Mustang GT, despite being down on power and torque from this Challenger, only 414 horsepower with that 5-liter V8, is just about as fast to 60 as this Challenger because it only weighs around 3,600 pounds, and our Challenger weighs in around 4,200 pounds. Now, 4,200 pounds means that this car has a better ride than the Mustang, honestly. I prefer the way that this car rides to either the Camaro or the Mustang, primarily because it's very well composed, but it is definitely a little softer than those others. Again, it's very much like BMW's current large sedan rides. Like the BMW 650i, the Challenger has an active suspension system. And what that means is, in all 4 struts in this vehicle, there's a little electronically controlled valve. And that valve can adjust the damping characteristics of the struts on all 4 corners or globally anytime the car chooses, based on both the computer's own algorithms as well as driver input via a little button here in the center console that allows you to choose a softer or a firmer setting to the damping. Now, that doesn't change the spring rates in this vehicle, so of course the characteristics of the suspension are going to be quite different from something like a fairly stiffly sprung vehicle like a Corvette or the new supercharged Camaro or a Shelby Mustang. Of course, power is what the Challenger SRT8 is all about, and with 470 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque, this car is exceptionally fast. And it sounds incredibly good while you're doing it, again thanks to that large displacement engine. Now there's really no way that a turbocharged engine can compete with this, and of course a supercharged engine is going to get that supercharged whine, which I personally like, but some people think interferes with the oral sensations going on in a sports car. That brings us neatly to performance numbers. Now, Chrysler says the Dodge Challenger SRT8 will run 0 to 60 in the high 4s, but in our testing we ranged between 4.3 and 4.5 seconds 0 to 60 with a quarter mile around 12.5 seconds. Now, of course, the big thing to keep in mind here is that we do have the 6-speed manual transmission equipped Challenger, which means that the 0 to 60 times and quarter mile times of this vehicle are very dependent on your driving style as well as traction, because this car probably could go faster if it had wider rear tires and grippier rubber. 4.3 seconds, about our fastest time in this vehicle, happened with an awful lot of wheel spin, and that's even with the stability control enabled in this particular vehicle. That goes the same for any vehicle that's over about 400 horsepower and is 2-wheel drive. So you're going to have exactly the same problem in something like a BMW M5, a BMW M6 for sure, the Jaguar XKRs, Mustangs, Corvettes, Camaros, etc. Once you're around that almost 500 horsepower and nearly 500 pound-feet of torque, and you're trying to do that with just 2-wheel drive, grip is your enemy. In terms of handling, it's important to remember that the Challenger is significantly heavier than the Camaro and the Mustang. And the standard Challenger SRT8 model only comes with 245 width tires all the way around. Now, our particular tester here has the optional staggered rubber, which puts wider tires in the rear, and that not only helps your acceleration time, but it also helps your handling as well. But this vehicle still isn't as good of a handler as the Camaro or the Mustang. Even so, however, this is personally my preference because of its softer and honestly more civilized ride. Now, the Mustang hasn't a live rear axle, which means that over broken pavement it can sometimes get a little bit unsettled, shall we say. Now, the Camaro with its independent rear suspension doesn't really do any better than the Mustang in situations like that. But this particular Challenger with its Mercedes essentially designed rear suspension performs admirably well over a wide variety of pavement types and pavement surfaces, and is surprisingly agile, I'd say, on these winding mountain roads. As I said before, our Challenger wears a $1,000 gas guzzler tax, and that's thanks to our EPA numbers of 14 in the city and 23 on the highway with a combined rating of 17 miles per gallon. However, we've been averaging a decent amount better than that in our 6-speed manual transmission equipped vehicle thanks to an extremely tall top gear. We've been averaging around 19.8 miles per gallon in mixed driving, as well as 0 to 60 testing and quarter mile testing, driving on these fun windy mountain roads where you're really giving the engine an awful lot of gas. So our fuel economy is actually somewhat surprising for this vehicle. If you do decide to get that 5-speed automatic transmission in your Challenger, then you're going to lose 1 mile per gallon on the highway in your EPA numbers. And based on our quick informal testing of a dealer-provided automatic equipped Challenger, we noticed a decent reduction in fuel economy, around 2 to 3 miles per gallon in our quick informal tests. In my mind, the only valid reason for getting the 5-speed automatic transmission over the 6-speed manual is if you're missing your left leg, because this manual transmission is just that good. The thing about the Challenger is that it's just very easy to drive and very easy to live with. The clutch is neither too firm nor too soft. The suspension is nice and comfortable. The seat's very comfortable. We have a wide range of adjustability. The transmission is an excellent transmission with ratios that match this engine's characteristics pretty much as perfectly as you can get. So what's my bottom line on the Challenger? Is it worth 45 grand? In my book, honestly, I think it is. This is definitely the American muscle car that I would buy. And that's primarily because as much as I like the Mustang GT, the suspension is just a bit too harsh for me, and the car is a bit too small for me as well. I'm really not that big of a person, but I do like a comfortable seat, a little bit more room, and I do like the idea of having real usable back seats. The ability to jam a fifth person in the Challenger really seems like a good idea to me as well. I mean, it's not something that you do all the time, and that fifth person really won't be very comfortable in the back, but if you need to, you could in this vehicle, and you just can't in a Camaro or a Mustang. That's been our quick take at the Dodge Challenger SRT8. Be sure to check out the full review as well as news, reviews, and more at thetruthaboutcars.com.